Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second in LEMDO's webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about working in the repository and also, don't worry, answering the question, what is a repository anyways? So hopefully the title will make more sense by the time we're about, 6 minutes into this. A bit about me before we begin, just so then you know who is talking at you for the next hour. I'm Navarra. I use they, them pronouns. And I'm the project manager for LEMDO. I've been working with LEMDO for just about 3 years and have been working with new editors and encoders, guiding them through working in the LEMDO environment for about 2 of those years. I'm based out of the University of Victoria in BC, although the lovely picture you see of me here was actually taken in Alberta, my home province. Outside of my working life, I'm an avid knitter and a baker. I always like having something to do with my hands. So you might see me kind of gesturing or see me moving around as I gesture with my hands, which you can't see very well with the screen. So that being said, if any of you want to be moving around, crafting, doodling, or anything else during this webinar, please feel free to do so. Also feel free to ask questions, either by just speaking up, interrupting me, or by asking in the chat, which Janelle will be monitoring. I also want to kind of recognize and say I'm a white settler living on unceded territory and benefiting from an ongoing history of colonization. So as part of my work and LEMDO's work towards decolonization, I'd like to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhees, and Esquimalt peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. All right, getting into the meat and potatoes of the presentation. These are our learning objectives for today. First, you will know what I mean when I say LEMDO and the repo. It's always good to start off on the same page about key concepts like these. You're also going to know the key commands for working in Terminal and the workflow that you're going to follow every work session. A quick note, I'm also going to refer to Terminal as command prompt almost certainly at some point today. They're interchangeable. I'm talking about the same thing. You're going to be able to navigate LEMDO's documentation, hopefully with ease, and the LEMDO repo itself, all of the LEMDO files. You're going to learn what elements are, what attributes are, and what values are. And you're going to know how to add them to your text to mark up your text. And finally, we're going to get some stuff done today. By the time you click leave meeting at the end of the session, you will have downloaded Subversion. And if you're using a Mac, Homebrew as well, you're going to have downloaded Oxygen and checked out the LEMDO repo. For those of you who are editors, you're working on a LEMDO edition, you and I have been in contact at some point in the past, and you want to try committing to the LEMDO repo, you'll also get to make a test commit, which is, always a good thing to do. That's a lot to cover. It's okay. Hopefully this presentation will, get through all of it, help all of these concepts seem a lot more approachable, and like something that you can do because you can. So let's begin by defining what LEMDO and the repo are. LEMDO is Linked Early Modern Drama Online. And it's a way of publishing editions of early modern English drama, whether that drama is a mayoral show or a Shakespearean play or a fragment of a manuscript. We publish them on anthology websites, including the 3 that I have on the screen right now. These are screenshots of our published so far anthologies, the Moemel mayoral shows, the Queensmen editions, and the Douay Shakespeare manuscript project. But we have plenty of others on their way. In order to publish these texts, We have to put them into a format that can go onto our websites. We use our own customization of a markup language called the TEI, or from the Text Encoding Initiative, to encode every part of an edition. That customization is a core part of what Lemdo is. For those of you who are familiar with TEI and or XML as a whole, our customization lives in the Lemdo-odd file. Feel free to check that out, look at it. For those of you who are new to all of this, don't worry, you don't need to look at the Lemdo-odd file. But if you're interested, it's kind of neat. Finally, Lemdo is a bunch of files. Every transcription of a play, every critical paratext, everything that you access on a Lemdo website is a file that we keep in a repository, which I have pictured a screenshot here. I'm going to share my screen in a second of my browser, so then you can see it in action. But the repo is a safe place for us to keep files. I'm going to talk about how to access and interact with the repo later on by downloading it to your own computer. But essentially, it's just a shared bunch of files. So I'm going to share this. And you can see on my screen now, hopefully, yes, I'm getting some nods, that same thing I had screenshotted. So this is our repo as it lives online. It has a bunch of folders here, the most important of which is data. If you click on data, you see all of our different more folders. Again, the most important of which is texts. And then these are all of our editions. And our files live inside of these folders. So you can see it online. And it has, a nice little layout. We'll look at it in some other ways later on today. Okay, let me skip back to where I was. All right. Before we move on to trying out lots of new things, we'll take a moment to learn about documentation and LEMDO-dev. There are two places that you can access documentation: our published Lemdo beta site, which Janelle, maybe you can put the link in the chat, lemdo.uvic.ca/lemdo, or our LEMDO-dev site. LEMDO-dev is private. It hosts editions and pages that aren't actually published yet and that aren't ready to be shared with the world. It's not crawled by Google. You're not going to find it by searching for it on your web browser. That's intentional. And to keep it that way, we don't share the URL. But if you're somebody who is already working with Lemdo, you probably have that URL already. You can look at the documentation either place. It's going to look the exact same. For today, I'm going to be showing you LEMDO-dev, where I can also just show you how to look at your in-progress edition when you get to that point. So this is the Lemdo development site, or LEMDO-dev. Our documentation you can access, and same on Lemdo beta, if you click in the top navigation on documentation and then select all documentation. You're brought to this big documentation index, which I'm going to make a little bit bigger. There we go. Big documentation index. It's actually 23 chapters of book here, which can seem a little bit daunting sometimes, but there are a few ways to navigate it to make it a little bit easier. The first thing is the stuff that you're likely to use first is at the beginning. That's always handy. So, you're going to start with a user guide and then move into quick start guidelines and then into the Lemdo platform. And chapter 2 is what we're going to be talking about today, more or less. Beyond that, you can, of course, scroll through and see all of the pages, or you can click on this hamburger menu over here, the one on the top left, 3 lines, and it shows all of the contents of this page. So if you know that you're working on semi-diplomatic transcriptions and you're working on a print edition, you scroll down, you see semi-diplomatic transcriptions, click that, and it brings you directly there. And then you can see all of our many, many pages about that. The hamburger menu exists on all of our pages on LEMDO-dev and LEMDO-beta. It also tells you who has worked on this page. In the credits and in About, you can see the metadata about the page. So that's always a good tool that you can use everywhere you go. With editions, when you're ready to start working on your edition, you want to see what you've done, of course. We all want to see that. You just go to editions, click that, and then find what you're working on. I'll show you Famous Victories of Henry V. That's one of our published plays already. But if you click it, it takes you to the edition page. You can click through your files and see the changes that you've made. It usually takes about an hour between when you hit send and send the files back to the LEMDO repo before you see them on the website, but that is fairly quick. Okay. Now I see that there are messages in the chat. Are there questions?
I'm answering the questions as we go.
Fantastic. Thanks, Janelle.
So we're good. We're caught up.
Awesome. All right, back to the slides. We're going to be thinking about documentation again shortly, so hopefully that detour will come in handy. I've mentioned Subversion a few times. Let's get a bit more detailed about what that is. There we go. So Subversion is a software that allows us to version files, which means every time you save a file to the LEMDO Subversion repository, that is permanently saved. We can go back to older versions, all the way back to the beginning of LEMDO, of a file or of the entire project, which hopefully we don't need to do because we've done so much work. So even if I make a really, really, really big mistake, I don't need to panic too much. We can go back. We tried to avoid needing to do that. Hopefully we can, fix what we've done, because it does take quite a bit of work on our programmer's part, but we can do it. So that's the first important thing about Subversion. It lets us keep versions of files. It also lets all of us who have permissions make changes from our own computers and send them back to the shared repo. So when you make a change from your computer, send it back to the centralized repository. I can then update my copy of it and immediately see the changes that you've made. So it's just a way of allowing interactions with shared files. The repo does live somewhere, and that somewhere is a server at the University of Victoria. I think it's in the basement of the Clarahue building. When you download the repo to your computer, you get the file sent to you from that repo at UVic. And then when you commit the changes, you send them back to the repo. And imagine that there are, 100 different computers connected to this. We're all doing this SVN up, SVN commit process of interaction. That means that you need to have something downloaded on your computer for Subversion before you can begin work on any LEMDO stuff. So if you don't have Subversion yet, I'm going to have you download it now. And here's how you're going to do that. The practice is a bit different for Windows users versus Mac users. And I was planning on putting the links into the chat, but I can't see the rest of my screen. Janelle or Mihaela, if you have documentation up in the lemdo.uvic.ca/lemdo site and can find those, download SVN for Windows and Mac, stick those in the chat, please. Or if the rest of you have documentation open already, you can find it in there. It's download Subversion Windows, download Subversion Mac in chapter 2. But for Windows users, the kind of key stuff is to first find out if your computer is 32-bit or 64-bit. You can do that by hitting your Windows key, searching for Control Panel, then going to System and Security, then System, and then looking for system type where it will say either 32-bit or 64-bit. Then you're going to go to the slicksvn.com/download URL, download the correct version. Fairly straightforward. For Mac users, there is an extra step. You also are going to need to install Homebrew. It's just, a requirement on Mac. First, you're going to open your terminal, which you can do by hitting your Spotlight search, which on a Mac is Command Space, and then searching for terminal. We're going to talk about it a bit more in depth later, but terminal is just a way of interacting with your computer. Once you have it open, you'll type brew doctor, which I have on the screen here. And if it says your system is ready to brew, great, that's what we're looking for. If it doesn't, you're going to go to brew.sh and copy the command from that site, which I am going to show you really quickly, just so then you know what it looks like. This is the command. It's quite small, there it is. You can just click this. You have it copied, and then paste it into your terminal and click return. It'll take a few minutes for it to download. You'll see on the left side of the screen, it will have little, beer tankards every now and then, and it will say pouring and brewing and other lovely puns like that, which makes me very happy every single time I see it. Chose a theme and they stuck to it. I respect that. Anyhow, once you've gotten everything and it's stopped flashing by, you're going to type brew doctor again. Even if you get like an error message of some sort, just type brew doctor, see if it says your system is ready to brew. If it does, fantastic. If you don't see your system is ready to brew still, put a message in the chat. And if Janelle's able to breakout room with you for a second and help, troubleshoot, we'll do that. Otherwise, we can also meet later and sort you out. But when you do get that your system is ready to brew message, you're going to install Subversion by typing brew install Subversion in your terminal and hitting return again.
Navarra,
Yes.
should we just stop to see if anybody's actually following along with us?
Yeah. I'll give a couple minutes for this. Let me open up the chat while we're here.
Okay, thumbs up from Jesus
Awesome.
and Erica.
Where is the clickable link for the for Windows to download? It's just in the PowerPoint here.
Oh,
I will
so
add it to chat.
It's also in that link that is on the lemdo.uvic.ca/lemdo. If you go there, I'll show you. It's this slick SVN right here. There we go.
Yep, David Swain adds a comment that anyone with managed Macs is going to need some support. That is certainly our experience with pretty much everyone you've worked for.
Yeah.
But if you need a letter or an email saying that you really need this for research, I'll happily do that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So some people will need to update their command line tools for Xcode. Yeah.
So, sorry, there are two 64-bit download options here, but the instructions, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. There we go. To minimize the chat again. All right. So once you have it downloaded, the instructions merge again for both Windows and Mac. You're going to need to check if Subversion has installed. For Mac folks, keep your terminal open. For Windows folks, open your terminal. You'll click your Windows key or your start key, and then type CMD. It'll say command prompt. Open that. I'll show you what that looks like. I can't show you what that looks like. Never mind, it opens on the wrong screen. But open your command prompt. Type in SVN space checkout, which Janelle, if you can stick that command into the chat for people to copy and paste, please. And then hit enter or return. With any luck, you're going to see an error message that says, not enough arguments provided. That's the error message that we like. We want that error message. It's our favorite. It means, yes, you have Subversion. And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Okay. Hopefully you're having success. All right. And now once you've seen that, not enough arguments provided, you can actually get the LEMDO repository. If your computer is slower or your internet is slower, might be best to just watch for now because it can take a while. And if you have Zoom going and you're checking out the repo, some computers, it kind of overwhelms that. But you can do it. For Mac users, again, there's just going to be one extra step. I recommend you download the repo into your documents folder.
Question from Erica. Did I ask how we install as well as download? I now have a folder of files. There's nothing to install. If you've downloaded the repo, you're good to go.
You're good to go. You have a folder of files.
Okay.
That's what you're
Thank
looking
you.
for. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're at
It's-
revision 17,674. So
Yeah.
that's the revision you should have on your computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
That means that's 17,674 times somebody has committed a change to the Subversion repository.
Laura says only. Yeah, this is why you're all going to be working in the repo. We can get that number up more.
Wait till we hit 1 million.
Oh yeah. Anyhow, so if you're working in Mac, I do recommend you download this into your documents folder just to make it easier to find in your Finder. So to do that, before you put in the command that Janelle just put, just type cd documents, hit enter, and then do that command that Janelle sent in. Erica, you're getting a error. Yeah, we'll have you break out with Janelle later on, if that's okay. Awesome. Okay, but it looks like at least some people are getting that Subversion in which, or that repo in, which is fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Janelle. And this command that Janelle's put into the chat, it's going to create a LEMDO folder and put all of the LEMDO files inside of that folder. It's kind of a handy little command to have. All right, now you have Subversion and you have the LEMDO repo. Let's talk about how we actually do our work in there. At Lemdo, we use Oxygen XML editor. It's kind of like Word, but for encoding. It's pretty popular with digital humanists and kind of a standard program to use. It works with the TEI, the Text Encoding Initiative, and it has lots of functionality specifically for what we do with it. You can download it at the URL, which one of us will maybe put in the chat if I can copy it.
I got it.
You've got it? Great. Which will take you here. Go products, Oxygen XML editor. That's where it took us, never mind. And it gives a download button. I always lose the download button. It's right here. And it will download to your computer. When you open it up, it's going to say, hey, you need a license. Select 30-day free trial, unless you already have a license. You would be registering for an academic one once you do get your, license. I'll also give you a quick tour around my own Oxygen, which I'll open up now. The one thing that I didn't open this morning. I actually clicked the wrong one. There we go. It'll take a quick minute to load. Awesome. Thanks, Janelle. Yes, it is a paid service after the 30-day trial period. I think it's cheaper with the academic license.
It's very deeply discounted for teaching and research. So you can get it for a year for $68, or you can get a permanent license for $137. That's US. A lot of universities do have a site license for it, so it's worth checking with your IT folks to see if you have access to it already.
Yeah. Okay, here we are. Oxygen. Mine might look a bit different from yours because I've messed around, so it's in dark mode, but it's going to be functionally the same. So you're going to close out of this welcome thing, and you won't have Lemdo open yet. The important thing is every time you do need to make sure that you are in Lemdo. So how you do that is you go up to Project at the top of your screen and click Open Project. You're going to go through your file explorer to find wherever you downloaded that Lemdo folder. If you're in Windows, you're going to go down on the left until you find your C drive. It's going to be in Users, and then whatever your user is. And then scroll down until you find Lemdo. If you're in Mac and you did it into Documents, you're going to go to your Documents in Finder and then find Lemdo. Once you've gotten to that Lemdo folder, just open up that lemdo-all.xpr. That's our project file. When it says, do you want to allow this to make changes to the functionality or something like that? Click yes. We do want changes because that's where we get our keyboard shortcuts and all of our validation messages and everything like that from. So click yes on that. And you'll see something that looks like this. On the left-hand side, it'll be project. You'll also see some things on the right-hand side. Close out of all of those. It'll be elements, attributes, transformation scenarios, maybe a few others. You can get rid of all of them. What we care about is this project on the left. So this looks the same as that repo that we saw earlier on online. We have Lemdo, and here we have data, that important folder that I mentioned, which is where our anthology about pages live. It's where our documentation files live. And most importantly, it's where our texts live. So if I click on that, I get this long list of folders. You can find your edition that you're working on in there probably. We use the abbreviations that are standard to the MLA and also the Digital Renaissance editions where MLA doesn't have abbreviations. If you don't know what they are for your edition, let Janelle know. She'll send you the abbreviations that you can find it. Then inside of a folder, and I hope you don't mind me using Henry V, you're going to have a bunch of other folders and one file. So this file here, the edition page, that's your edition landing page. When I showed you that Henry the famous victories on the website earlier, that would correspond to this edition page. You also have
famous victories is FV.
I know I'm in the wrong Henry V.
Yeah.
But I think this one has more folders or something like that.
Yeah,
I remember when I was thinking that earlier. FV
is the source play for Henry V, or one of the source plays.
Yeah. Well, they have the same number. This one just also has perf. Let's look at FV because that's what you saw online earlier. But we do have the edition page. So this file corresponds exactly with that, edition landing page that we saw earlier. We have the app folder, which contains your annotations and your collation. Crit, which contains all of your critical paratexts, including bibliography, general introduction, performance introduction, stuff like that lives in Crit. You might have an images folder if you're adding images to your edition, and you will have a main. Main will contain your semi-diplomatic transcription or transcriptions if you've got, multiple editions. It will also contain your modernized text. Perf is pretty specific to Queen's Men's editions. It's their performance bits. And then sup is supplementary text, which are mostly kind of a holdover from our predecessors. The old ISE, the old QME site, the old DRE site all had supplementary texts. Most of our brand new LEMDO editions won't have that same folder. But app, crit, and main, those are your kind of three that you're going to see. Yes, Janelle puts in the chat, we do not require or desire supplementary texts. The great thing about LEMDO is because it is linked early modern drama. In a lot of cases, those supplementary texts already exist in some form online. We can link to those. Okay. So you've seen Oxygen. Let's get a little bit more vocabulary for working in there. The first big vocabulary is the word element. Elements are blue by default in Oxygen, and they're indicated by these lesser than and greater than signs. They wrap around text, so you'll have one half of it in front of text, and the other half after text. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like in a second. There's an opening tag here and a closing tag here. And they're marking up whatever is in between the opening and the closing. We can kind of think of them as a noun. They're marking up a thing. So if I write down a change in a file, I can wrap that change text where I say, I made a change in this change element and say to the computer, hey, this thing, it's a change, which for us as readers might seem really obvious. Computers don't have that same kind of smarts skills that we have. So we need to tell it, this is what this thing is. Attributes give detail to elements. They're orange by default. And you'll notice here that I've actually added an @ sign in front of it. That's how we indicate in our documentation and in our presentations that this is an attribute. You'll see more of the @ sign if you come to more of our presentations. Attributes are kind of like a category of adjectives. So imagine we're marking something up and we're saying this thing is a red thing. We might put, you know, a color attribute and say that it is the color red. Here we would be talking about when something happened, and so we're going to use when. And then values would be like the adjectives themselves. They describe in more detail exactly what is being tagged. So if we have a change and we've said, when did that happen? Well, it happened 2024, 05, 23. In Oxygen, they appear in dark red and they're wrapped in these double quotation marks. So if we put that all together, this is what it looks like. We have our text in black, or if you're like me and you have your Oxygen in dark mode in white, and it's wrapped in a dark blue element. We have the opening tag here and the closing tag here. In the opening tag only, we have an attribute, we have an equal sign, and then we have the associated value in quotation marks. We don't need to include any attributes in the closing tag. Hopefully this is still kind of making sense. Are there any questions right now? Okay.
Navarra, I'm going to
Yep.
put a link in the chat to our quick start to help people learn a little bit about XML and TEI. So if that went too fast or you didn't quite catch everything, you can pick up the vocabulary more slowly by reading through this quick start document.
Yeah, that is the problem. We have so much stuff. When people are starting out, there's lots to learn. So please do use our documentation as you know, a reference for all of this and to kind of deepen your knowledge. Thanks, Janelle. Okay, we'll move on to a bit of workflow. So you've seen Terminal. We're going to get into it in a bit more detail. Terminal, or your command prompt, is a way of interacting with your computer. It's similar to, you know, adding and deleting and moving files from your file explorer or your Finder, but it's a bit more in your computer's brain. I always feel like a very cool 90s hacker when I work in Terminal. I'm going to need to get a trench coat and some like sunglasses next, briefcase. That'll be cool. And there are some regular commands that you're going to use in there. And I'm actually going to take a second and show you what Terminal looks like on my computer. Here it is. It's, you know, that black screen with white text that you might see on, you know, every TV drama about computers. I've gone to the wrong slide, 1 second. Here we are. Okay. So there are a few key commands that you're going to use. The first one is CD, or change directory. This is how you move between directories in your terminal, and directories is just another name for folders. So directories equals folder, but directories is the term that we tend to use. So if you've downloaded Lemdo into your C drive, like I had done on Windows, just typing CD Lemdo into your terminal is going to move you to the Lemdo directory. If you downloaded it into Documents, you would type CD Documents / Lemdo, and that will get you into Lemdo. You just need to, you know, say explicitly every step of the way. To go back up, let's say you wanted to get out of Lemdo and back to Documents, you would type CD .. / brings you back one level. And this is going to come in handy, you know, when you're doing your work. Feel free to have your terminal open and practice moving around and stuff like that. SVN up is the next big one. It indicates your local, or sorry, it updates your local copy of the repo so that you get all of the changes that other people have made. when you make a change in your local copy, send it into the centralized repo, I do an SVN up, I get to see what changes you've made. It's always very exciting to see. I love it. It's really important that you do an SVN up at the beginning of every work session. Yes, James, it is the first step whenever you start working. It's also good to do if you're working, all day on Lemdo, SVN up regularly. I usually do about every hour, but you can do it more. You can do it a little bit less, but I recommend doing it fairly regularly. Reason being that sometimes we make really big changes across all of the files, or that, give you new keyboard shortcuts. And so when you SVN up, you get the most recent bunch of tools that we can give you. SVN status will list all of the files that you've made changes in and the pathways to get to them. So when you do SVN status, it will say, you've modified the famous victories modern text. Here's how you get to that text. You're also going to run this from the Lemdo level. So same as SVN up, you're going to run from Lemdo, SVN status, also run from Lemdo. SVN commit is the other big one. This is the one that we talk about probably the most. It's what lets you commit your changes, send them back to the centralized Lemdo repo at UVic. You should be not in the Lemdo level when you do this, but in the lowest level. So if you made a change in the famous victories first quarto semi-diplomatic transcription, your file would live down the pathway lemdo/data/text/fv/main. So you would CD all the way down that. You'd do CD lemdo/data/text/fv/main. And that's why it's so useful to do that SVN status. It's going to tell you that. That's where your file is. You can just copy and paste if you want. Save a little bit of time.
May I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
We actually give editors commit privileges only on the folder that contains your edition,
Mm-hmm.
which should make you feel secure. You cannot damage anybody else's edition. But that's why you need to go down your tree, because while you have the rights to check the whole thing out, you have the right to commit only at the level of your own edition.
Yeah. Thanks, Janelle. When you do commit, you must always put a message about what you've done. Your format is SVN commit space -m space, and then in quotation marks, a message about what you did. Giving detail is helpful. If something goes wrong and our build breaks, Janelle and Mihaela and I and Martin at UVic, we can see, who made commits and what might have gone wrong. If something goes wrong, again, don't panic too much. It happens to the best of us. I think I break the build most frequently out of everybody at this point, although I haven't for almost a week now, but I was the last one maybe. All right, so I've put a try it in here. If you're an editor and you know that you have permissions over a file and you want to try testing a commit, you can follow along right now and do the steps on your computer. If not, you can watch what I do, just then you can see what your workflow is going to be. So first things first, I'm going to go into my command prompt and I'm going to cd lemdo. And you see here, now it says lemdo. That means I'm in the file. On a Mac, you're not going to see everything. I don't think you'll just see the most recent place where you are, or the direct file where you are. And then I'm going to run SVN up and hit enter. And here come all of the files that anybody's worked on since the last time I updated from this computer. I love seeing this every single time. So we see that people have updated all of these files, added a few files, and now I'm updated to this revision. Now I can go into Oxygen, and I'm going to go into a file that I have permissions in and that I'm the only person working on right now. I'm going to go into that one, which I'm going into the anthologies, LEMDO, about, and our ethos introduction, because this is a file that I've been working on lately, and I know nobody else is currently working on it.
Make it a wee bit bigger, please.
Yep, thank you. In here, I'm going to scroll down through all of this metadata in the TEI header element. I'm going to scroll down until I find the revision desk. Revision desk describes all of the revisions that have happened to this file. So if you are wanting to make a test commit, I recommend going into your folder, into your edition page. So again, let's see. The one that is just a direct child of that folder, it'll be EMD and then the abbreviation of your page or of your edition, and then _ edition. Find that revision desk. Create a new line. You're going to just add a change statement. As soon as you open up that lesser than bracket, you're going to see this pop down. And the first thing will be change, because Oxygen, it knows that you probably want to put a change element here. Hit enter, and it's going to create that. You can then copy the format below. So you'll begin with a who attribute. And if you know your ID, put that in. And then when, you can put today's date, 2024-05-23. We follow that ISO standard year, month, day in our format. And then in between the opening tag and the closing tag, you're going to put test. Now you're going to validate. This is very important. We always validate before we commit by clicking this little red check mark at the top, or you can Control-Alt-Shift-V on your keyboard. I think it's Command-Option-Shift-V on a Mac. And we're looking for this little green square at the bottom that says validation successful. If something goes wrong and the computer says, oh no, this isn't valid, I'll show you what that looks like. It's going to give a red squiggly line on the element that contains the error. And it's going to give you an error message at the bottom, which is very small here, but it says, error, straight apostrophes are not allowed in text. Use curly apostrophes instead. The shortcut to add a curly apostrophe is Control-Shift apostrophe on PC and Command-Shift apostrophe on Mac. So you can usually just follow along with whatever it tells you to do, and that will make those go away. So if I were to change this, Control-Shift apostrophe, I create a curly apostrophe, I validate again, and I get that nice little green square. We always make sure that we're valid before we commit. We always make the joke at LEMDO, this is the job where we get the most validation. And then we can save either by clicking that floppy disk or Control-S.
May I jump in with a workflow tip?
Please.
I recommend saving and then validating. If you accidentally introduce an unwanted character when you save, then the validation step will catch it.
Okay. So save, then validate. And validate often, every few minutes when you're starting out, but always, always, always before you commit. If you ever can't get your file back to valid, just send me a message or send Janelle a message on email. We'll help you figure it out before you commit. All right, now that I've saved and validated, I'm going to go back to command prompt and I'm going to SVN up again, just in case somebody's committed something that is important for me to have. Then I type SVN status and hit enter. I see that I have an M for modified, a pathway, that's data/anthologies/lemdo/about, And then I have the file that I was working on. So I've modified this file. And this section is how to get there. So again, I'm going to CD down this pathway, which I'm just going to copy and paste, and then hit enter. And you see now I am in that Lemdo Data Anthologies Lemdo About folder or directory. If you're on a Mac, you're just going to see this last word. For you, it will be different because you'll be in your edition. But that last word will tell you you are in the right place. Now I can either SVN status again. I typically don't because I've just done it here. I'm going to just commit. So SVN commit -m and then a message about what I've done. So I've done a test commit. And then I hit enter. Now it might ask you for a password. If it does, the first thing you're going to do is check that the username it asks for is your Netlink ID. If it's not your Netlink ID, hit enter and then type in your Netlink ID. If it is your Netlink ID, great. Just type in your Netlink password and hit enter. And you should see something similar to this. Transmitting file data, done, committing transaction, committed revision. And so now it's at revision 17675. And Janelle's put into the chat, your Netlink ID is your unique ID at UVic. If you don't have one yet, we'll help you get one. Please send one of us an email. Okay, and now I'm going to CD back to Lemdo. So CD .. You'll remember that brings us back one level. So I'm now out of About and into Lemdo. I can also do a bunch of .. slashes at once. And that will move me back as many .. dots as I've put in. Thank you. Janelle's put our emails into the chat. Okay. So a quick reference on our workflow that we've just done. So first you CD into Lemdo from your terminal. And you'll see this looks a little bit different from what I just showed you. That's because I was on a Linux when I took these screenshots. You get to see what different operating systems look like a bit. I didn't put my Mac into this. I have it so it's funky colors, and I didn't think that would be particularly useful to see. So CD into Lemdo, you'll then do your SVN up, and you'll see any files that people have worked on come flying by or trickling by, depending on the speed of your computer and your internet. And at the bottom, it will say updated to revision, whatever the number is. In the screenshot here, it's revision 17,663. Then you go into Oxygen, you do your work, you encode your modernized text, you add notes, you make comments, whatever it is that you need to do. You save, you validate. So I've actually got these in the wrong order for what Janelle recommends. But Control S, validate, check for that green square. Head back to your terminal, do an SVN up again. You're less likely to see things come by here unless you've been working for a long time. But it's good to do anyhow. Run your SVN status still while you're in Lemdo, and you'll see that modified message, the pathway, and then the file that you've changed. CD down that pathway. Make sure that you don't include the file name itself. You only want the folder name. So here I've put Data Anthologies Lemdo About. For you, it's likely a data, text, whatever your edition abbreviation is, and then any folders that you want to go in from there, and hit enter. Once you're at that lowest level of the pathway, we SVN commit. Always include a commit message by putting in that -m, then your message in quotations. And then the last thing we do is CD back to Lemdo, and then you can begin again. Remember, going back up the tree, CD space .. Okay, I'm going to pause for questions really quickly before I do a recap of that whirlwind of knowledge. Don't see anything coming in the chat.
No questions in the chat that we haven't answered.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for keeping on top of those, Janelle.
Welcome.
Okay. So a quick recap. We've got some key vocabulary. You learned Lemdo is a publishing platform for digital editions and anthologies. It's also a TEI customization and a set of files that live in the repo. You then learned that the repo is that shared set of files that lives at UVic, and that we all interact with using our Subversion commands in terminal. The last big piece of vocab that you learned is LEMDO-dev, which is our unpublished development site. We also have Lemdo beta, which is where those links that we've sent you today are. It's published, although we're not yet, shouting its existence from the mountaintops. It is in beta, so there are still changes to be made. And you'll see on some of our documentation that we've got draft watermarks on it. Once we've got everything up to date, we'll do a big celebration and publish the final site. You then got to practice navigating documentation a little bit in that Lemdo beta site. You got to see that documentation is ordered logically from what you're most likely to use first, later on. You also got to see that we have a hamburger menu that, on the left-hand side, 3 horizontal lines for easier navigation. And then finally, you learned those key commands for working in terminal: the cd, svn up, svn status, svn commit, and cd ... and the workflow that you're going to follow every work session. We also learned, we also practiced working in Oxygen a little bit. You learned that you always need to have that lemdo-all.xpr file open before you start work. Usually it will stay open once you've opened it once, as long as you're not working on other, XML projects. And you learned that we always validate before committing. You saw what we mean by element, attribute, and value, and you got to see a little bit of how those work and how they look in Oxygen. You learned that Oxygen is going to give you a drop-down menu when you start typing. You can just hit enter and have data filled in, because Oxygen works with our TEI customization and gives you recommendations based on that. We do have some resources that Janelle's been putting into the chat as we go. Thank you again, that I recommend you have open as you start your encoding journey. You'll find all of these specific pages in our documentation index, the first thing on here, or you can access them in the links in the presentation, which I sent out this morning before our session began. I'll also send a follow-up email after this with links to everything. So our documentation index, bookmark that. I highly recommend having it open every time that you're encoding. So then you can double check what you're doing. There's a work in the command line, which will tell you what you're doing in the command line, remind you of key vocabulary, give you some more vocabulary. It's a really handy piece of documentation. Work in Subversion, which gives you all of those Subversion commands that you need. Update your local copy, commit changes to the Lemdo repo. And this one is probably my favorite piece of documentation that I put together, is the workflow for working in the command line. And it gives you that workflow in a very quick step-by-step. So once you've learned it once, you can just return to that documentation and have it open so that you remember exactly what you need to do. Janelle has also put into the chat that introduction to TEI and XML, which is a very handy piece of documentation as well. And there are a few acknowledgements that I would like to make. The first is to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council for funding this webinar series. We're all very excited to have the opportunity to do such a big knowledge mobilization project. Thank you to myself for slide design. Good job on that template, Navarra. Thank you to Martin Holmes, our programmer at HCMC, who works on our TEI customization, and to HCMC itself, the UVic Humanities Computing and Media Center, for site design and hosting. Now it is 9:01. If you need to peel out, please do. I'm glad I'm seeing thank yous. I'm glad it was helpful. Before I, send you all off for the day, I'm going to plug our upcoming webinars. Next month's theme is diversity, access, and accessibility. June 13th, Janelle will be leading the first half of a webinar on endings compliance, open access, and equity. And then I'll be talking during the second half on making accessible editions, where I'll talk about positioning yourself for editing, writing alt text for images, and using plain and inclusive language. You can register at the SurveyMonkey link that I'll put in the chat. We have descriptions of all of our webinars. I'll put registration links in a PDF that I'll send out in that resources email later on today. All of our technical webinars are all part of the Canadian Certificate in Digital Humanities. So you'll get a credit towards that for every technical webinar that you attend. You can go to the ccdhhn.ca website, search for LEMDO, you'll see all of those there.